Welcome, Dungeon Plunger Union members. I have my +1 plunger, a cup of coffee flavored holy water, and a very special Union member with us today to help plunge the dungeon and flush evil down the drain. This week, we have Heinrich D. Moore, a prolific author of fine Call of Cthulhu products, namely the Heinrich's Call of Cthulhu Guide to Character Creation and Heinrich's Guide to Carcosa. I believe that's what it's called. As well as a bunch of other scenarios. I will have links to his stuff, his drive-through page in the show notes as always. Welcome to the show, Heinrich.
Thank you so much, and what an introduction. My name is Heinrich Moore, and what is there to say that you haven't covered? I'm a community content creator on DriveThru RPG, specifically the Miskatonic Repository, which is Chaosium's community content program, and I'm best known for the books that you just mentioned. And hello to the Union, and it is a pleasure to be here.
Your union card is in the mail.
Excellent.
If you don't receive it within a week, just let me know and I'll make sure that we get it out to you. So I noticed you have an accent. You're originally from Germany, but you've lived in the US for a good chunk of your life. Is that right?
That's right. Moved to West Virginia as when I was younger. Then did education in Washington D.C. and have lived everywhere from China to other places since then. I have no hope for what my accent is right now. I sound like a foreigner when I'm in the U.S. and I sound like an American when I'm in Germany.
No way. Wow, that's crazy. I wouldn't think that. But I guess that makes sense. I mean, I know here in Montreal, in Canada, we have like French Canadians, and there's a big difference between the accent, like a Parisian accent versus a like Canadian French accent. So I guess I shouldn't be super surprised about that. Um, so how did you get into role-playing games?
So when I was growing up in the US, I sort of grew up in a hobby store. I don't think there's a very unique story. Many of us sort of spent our youth just going to the hobby store, playing Magic the Gathering, and participating in all the hobbies there. And that is where I met who would become my future brother-in-law. And I overheard him running a game, and I asked if I could join because I had independently picked up a number of Dungeons and Dragons books, but ironic for a hobby that requires friends to play with. I think many of us getting into the hobby are introverts and don't have those social connections. So that was me. I had all of these D&D products that I was gazing over and dreaming about, but hadn't actually been able to put into use. And so he ran an old module series of modules called Against the Giants, which was part of the longer Spider Queen um, uh, campaign pack. And yeah, that was my start. And after that, it was everything from Vampire the Masquerade to all the other White Wolf products to Call of Cthulhu, of course. A little bit of GURPS, and yeah, just a lot of different games.
So do you still play Magic, or are you primarily like an RPG guy or board
I
games
I
or
am I am very much a RPG guy and a board game guy, also a video game guy, I suppose at this point. I hung up my Magic the Gathering hat many years ago, and actually just recently sort of decided, okay, here's my collection of cards, some of which are valuable. Meanwhile, and we're gonna set that aside. We're gonna put it on eBay or whatever. I'm going to officially mark that as sort of a close part of my life. But that said, I still love a lot of card games, and the Arkham Horror card game is just fantastic. And I have bought way too many of those scenarios and investigator packs.
interesting? Is Arkham the Arkham Horror card game, is that similar to the board game, or is it its own complete like separate product?
So it is made by or produced by Fantasy Flight, one of the big board game companies out there. And they have kind of their alternative Call of Cthulhu universe with their own set of characters. And so if you play a number of their games like Arkham Horror, the board game, you will see a lot of similarities both between the art and the characters that are available. Uh, as was perhaps the case with you, I spent many, many hours playing the Arkham Horror board game. I have all the expansions over there. I've got the expansion for the expansion. Haven't played it in years, but I certainly got my money's worth out of it. So yeah, it would be very familiar for folks coming over from that.
Talking about Lovecraft, then, how was it that you got introduced to Lovecraft and Call of Cthulhu?
Yeah, so originally it was through my brother-in-law who provided me a collection of Lovecraft stories that I yeah fell in love with. I One of the first ones I read and one of my favorite ones was Beyond the Mountains of Madness, which also is featured as a Call of Cthulhu campaign setting that I've run and that is available and highly recommended. So I really enjoyed the stories. I was in high school at the time. Um, so I think it spoke a lot to my sense of alienation, especially as a foreigner at the time. I wasn't a US citizen, in a small town in West Virginia. Um, there were there was a lot to relate, I will say, in my own interpretation of the works in Lovecraft stories. And Yeah, so I've enjoyed them for many years, and have even more enjoyed, I think, what folks in the community have done with Lovecraft's works since then. I think just as or more important is what came after Lovecraft, based on his works or inspired by his works. Um, yeah.
The stuff that spun off of Lovecraft, what would be something that you're thankful materialized?
Well, I mean, some of the things that we've already talked about, right? The board games, the card games, the movies, right? Things like In the Mouth of Madness is a classic, um, and I think folks taking all of that material in new original directions and directions that removed it, fortunately, from the problematic nature of the author himself, I think have given that trove of ideas sort of new life and a life that is in some way separate from the author, which means that, frankly, a lot more of us get to enjoy it in a way that we would not otherwise had we been limited to those original stories.
Very true. I do struggle with this idea of, Lovecraft's like racism
Mm.
and um, I guess xenophobia.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously like not a good thing. And when I was first introduced to Lovecraft, I thought it was just like, oh, he was a product of his time, and
Mm.
then was really discouraged to learn that it wasn't that, he was much more of a bigot than, we were led to believe. So that was it. Like I said, I always struggle with this concept of like, I love, like you said, the material, the ideas are fascinating, but there's definitely like that darker side to it where I'm like, I don't know how I feel about supporting something like that. And, I mean, I guess I console myself in the fact that he doesn't see any profit where, and
Right.
he didn't really, he kind of was living in sort of like poverty, for most of his life, at least near the end anyway. So there is that, I guess, if there's the silver lining. So what would you say then is your favorite Lovecraft story?
I would say Beyond the Mountains of Madness was one of his sort of novellas, and I think that it brings together a lot of the great themes that he plays on. Um, I reread it not too many years ago when I ran the campaign, which is based on the book and sort of allows you to follow in the footsteps of the Starkweather Moor expedition that is featured in the story. But also, Beyond the Mountains of Madness has a campaign in the Arkham Horror card game, which is also really good. So it's been fun to see everyone's different interpretations of that story, and it's a great exploration story going into the unknown, encountering really bizarre things, being cut off from civilization. For a kid growing up and watching movies like Indiana Jones, there was just so much to love in that.
Yeah, I think we need an Indiana Jones and the Antarctic expedition. The mountains, Indiana Jones and the Mountains of Madness would be pretty awesome.
Well, I think Del Toro has for years played with the idea of creating a Beyond the Mountains of Madness movie that, alas, has never gotten off the ground, but would be sensational.
I'm sure if, anybody could do it, he would be the
Mm,
one that would do justice for it. Uh,
hmm
I'm a little I'm a little divided on his Hellboy interpretation. I mean,
mm.
I still really enjoyed the Hellboy movies, but it kind of diverges pretty radically from the comics, I find. Or
Yep.
graphic novels, if that's, damn it, Jason. Um
I'm happy with either label. Either way, I have a lot of them. And
uh
Hellboy, yeah, what a great run of books.
yes. I especially love the BPRD, like the Bureau for
Hmm.
Paranormal Research and
Yep.
Defense, and the whole like Plague of Frogs storyline was fabulous. Like such a great take on deep ones without actually making them deep ones. And then Abe Sapien and all that kind of stuff. So I
Yeah.
really, yeah, Mike Mignola and his team really like knocked it out of the park with that.
Hmm.
So let's talk about um, Heinrich's Call of Cthulhu Guide to Character Creation. So when I read this, like when I read the title, I was like, holy macaroni, that is a mouthful.
Yes.
I was like-
Accurate. Accurate.
so what was,
I can break down every single part of the title because there was reasoning behind it.
yeah, okay, so let's talk about it.
Well, so it was important that it was called Heinrich's something for marketing purposes, right? My name is my marketing, and so it needed to be on the tin. We needed to have Call of Cthulhu in there, both because it's for Call of Cthulhu and in case it was successful and I wanted to make other character creation guides. Um, and then character creation was used because, frankly, investigator creation, which would be the appropriate label for Call of Cthulhu, where characters are called investigators, was an even more mouthful. So that's how we ended up with this long title. But I'm happy with it.
No, it's a perfectly appropriate title. Exactly explains what it is. So in case people aren't able to like comprehend that, essentially what you have here is what we got like 100 and almost 50 pages, let's say, of tables to create a character or an investigator for Call of Cthulhu, um, that is extremely detailed.
Yeah, we've got I don't know how many tables I have in here. Over 100 randomized tables across. I'm seeing 32 chapters, and I think the chapter names give some idea of what the book does. So if you're familiar with the Call of Cthulhu investigator sheet, for background, there will be things like ideology, significant people, meaningful locations. And so we have tables for all of those, of course, but we also have tables for encounters with strange entities, romance, crime, expeditions, and of course, visiting other dimensions.
First of all, the part about like the background stuff, like for a typical investigator, I had always saw those on the character sheet in Call of Cthulhu. Like I started playing Call of Cthulhu sometime in like the fifth edition era,
Mm-hmm.
1909, well, in the late 90s, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was a place where you just wrote your stuff, whatever things came up. And I didn't actually realize that it was part of the rules. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
if it was a part back then, but looking through the seventh edition, which is what I'm playing now, I was like, holy crap, this actually is like important, to the character, on some level. And then the other thing that I always found very, very frustrating about playing Cthulhu, um, was that I felt like you always had these one-dimensional characters that didn't have any connections to the reality around them. They didn't have families, they didn't have, well, they had a lot of friends, but those friends usually ended up dying. And then
Yes.
you would have to be like, oh, I'm going to avenge you and figure out what happened. Um, so I found like this was fabulous for like fleshing all of that out and creating something that might not be atypical. One of my friends is running a Delta Green campaign right now, and even though it's taking place in modern times, he was able to use this too,
Mhm.
and he said it worked very, very well. So it's not, at least my understanding is that this isn't like a setting, like it's setting agnostic essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, certainly the 1920s is the default classic setting for Call of Cthulhu. But frankly, most of the Call of Cthulhu scenarios games I play, I think, take place in more contemporary times. Or, I mean, my scenarios anyway take place usually in the 1990s because it's this wonderful sweet spot before cell phones are really ubiquitous and. But they still have most of the modern conveniences that we're familiar with. Um, so it was important to me that the book could be used across different ages. I would say that even for Gaslight 1890s, the book works. I think with Dark Ages, right, if you're going to go back to medieval England, say, I think you're going to have to be more creative in how you interpret some of the results. And maybe selective in which results you go with. And I mean that's part of what I wanted with the book was to provide you, in a sense, as much information and as many tools as possible. And I think those folks who have enjoyed the book, like it sounds you have, which I'm very glad to hear, have figured out how to use those tools in the book to make it work for them. And Yeah, it's been great to see that.
So I had a couple of questions when it came to like using the book, for instance, before we go into kind of like the creative process that went behind making this. For instance, when it talks about a character's like birthplace, how would you view that? Like, for instance, in the Delta Green campaign that my friend is running, he basically said, okay, well, you guys are American, and then this is sort of like where your ancestry is from. Was that
Mm-hmm.
sort of like the intention of that, or was it more meant to be like, no, no, you're actually like from that country?
Yeah, I want to be careful anytime I say sort of what the intention was and how a particular table or part of the book should be used, because at the end of the day, it's yours, and you use it however works. What your friend was doing with Delta Green, that sounds fantastic, right? I think that um, uh, gets to makes the table useful and still retains it while allowing them to craft the campaign that they want to craft. I would say that my thought behind that set of tables was twofold. So, first of all, the character creation guide is inspired by a set of existing setting neutral, or I should say, system neutral books that were created by, let me see, I'm going to get this wrong if I don't look it up exactly, a Task Force Games. So this was in the 1990s, and the books were all titled Central Casting. So you had Central Casting Heroes of Legend, Central Casting Heroes Now, Heroes for Tomorrow, etc. And so those books were foundational in the creation of this character creation guide, and they had tables similar to that in terms of sort of being able to be born anywhere on the planet. And I wanted to retain that rather than have sort of a more specific roll a d20, you're either born in Innsmouth or Arkham or Kingsport or one of the other Lovecraft country sites, to address what you were discussing earlier, which is the one-dimensional nature of so many Call of Cthulhu investigators. And I think we realize the problem, but we don't appreciate how easy the solution is until you're rolling a dice and you suddenly have to figure out, ah, I am Romanian. And how has this investigator gotten to the United States or wherever else the campaign took place? Or the investigators from Singapore, any of these other places where just the mere statement that is going to be where the investigator is originally from already starts, I think, that creative process of really imagining this person in a way that I think classic character creation in Call of Cthulhu, where you often focus on what is your occupation. I am a PI. I know what that is. I am a doctor. I know what that is. And have that shape the character. Here we start from birth.
So when we made characters for my Masks and Nyarlathotep game, I basically explained, to them, I'm like, look, we're starting off in Peru. You guys need to have a reason about why you're going to be there, what makes sense for you. And then I think they started with an idea of kind of character that they wanted to play, like the type of profession that they wanted to play. But then, so some, I was very loose with it in the sense that I said, I don't want you to be ruled by the dice.
Mm-hmm.
I want the dice to be like an inspiration to you
That's
and
right.
allow you to like, weave a character together that you're going to find really interesting. And my only real big fear was like, I'm like, I hope they don't die or go insane before they get a chance to actually like explore some of these things. And then the other issue that I'm kind of running into now is that because the Peru chapter there's a big like span of time between Peru and New York. And so I was like, okay, here's a great opportunity for me to like play a little bit with my characters'
Mm-hmm.
backgrounds that they've created, these very well-developed, characters, and take some of the ideas that they had. So I made a list of everything that they had, all these cool things that they had, the cool NPCs that got created, because I was like, there's no way I'm wasting this opportunity. And now I started doing something and I'm like, oh no. I'm like, this is fabulous. Like we're really like things have really begun to like develop in just the one session sidetrack that we've started on. And I'm like, I really hope that I'm going to be able to continue this through masks and that, they'll that I haven't kind of like gone like, oh, you know what? We're not going to do the masks campaign anymore because this is too interesting. You know what I mean? Like, was that an issue in the when you've used the book where, um, and was the intention to be able to use it with pre-written scenarios, or was it more meant to be and again, I know you don't want to say, um, you know, give people like what your intentions were, but or was it more meant for kind of like making more of a sandbox, what we would call a sandbox style campaign?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for saying that. I really don't want to limit folks in how they use it because I think you can use the book in a uh, very straightforward way to help um, any creative roadblocks, right? If you need an occupation, you can roll an occupation. If you need to have something that happened to you in childhood, you can roll that, right? If you need an NPC that your character is friends with, you can roll that. So that is one level. The next level, which I think most people are going to enjoy, and which I think is the approach that you're taking, is yeah, we're going to use this, and we're not going to be ruled by the dice. And that can mean you get rerolls if you get a result you don't like. It can mean that I pick the result because I need something for the campaign. It's any number of times that someone rolls a number, and I like to do this sort of like I have the book and the players rolling the dice, right? And we kind of go back and forth, almost like a choose your own adventure.
Hmm.
And I see a result on the table, like one off from what they rolled, but that would just be kind of perfect for either the campaign or the character or both, and then I'll just go with that, right? And as you said, I'm not going to be ruled by the dice. I'm going to go with what's interesting and appropriate for the character. And then the third way that you could use it is to design campaigns around characters. I had one friend who had us all create characters using the character creation guide, and then the campaign came together based on all of our collective backgrounds. And the book provides you enough to make that happen. And I think it's reflective of the fact that I want keepers of arcane lore and game masters and dungeon masters to, you know, appreciate what a great tool character backgrounds are. Um, I mean, as you said, like they can live in a campaign and potentially hijack a campaign if you're
Hmm.
not careful. So those are all like great ways of using the book, and I think folks have used it in all those ways, which makes me yeah, just very satisfied. Um, I'll say that in terms of kind of the danger you were pointing out of having backstories that are in a sense too in depth. So such that they are incompatible with the campaign. My theory behind this book was that I want to provide individuals with interesting data points,
Mm.
bits of information that in themselves don't necessarily mean much. You could put them on a page, you would have a character, and that would be fine. But what I find as one is using this book, the human mind draws the connections between those data points. And that's really where the story comes in. It's not the result you roll that is the most significant aspect of it. It is how you are interpreting that result in light of what has come before and what may come after. And I think for players who are maybe not used to creating backstories for their characters, it's wonderful to kind of see this world open up to them where they
Hmm.
are getting pulled into the character's background and becoming excited to see what this person can do.
So that reminds me or feels very reminiscent of what solo role playing is. Solo role playing feels like it's really come into its own these days. Um, is solo role playing something that you did before, and this was like your way of like contributing to the hobby in that manner?
I have certainly tried it, and Chaosium has a number of modern solo scenarios that are really interesting. I played some of the really old ones going back many editions, and I enjoyed those. Though, frankly, I think for me, solo RPGing is best when I have one game master and one player,
Okay,
and you have this really kind of intimate connection because all the action is on this one person. Um,
right.
when you first do it, it can be a bit intimidating because it's like there's nowhere else for the spotlight to go. It's going to be on you. But with something like the character creation book, and even some of these solo scenarios, I think it's really fun to have that human interaction where someone is making decisions and the other person is letting them experience the consequences of their actions, as it were. So certainly, I wanted to make a product that um, you could have fun with, even if you never used the character in a campaign. And growing up with the central casting books that I mentioned, and now with this book, I think it's a very enjoyable evening to just roll up a character and really have someone developed who's had experiences, who's had adventures, and feel like you had a bit of a Call of Cthulhu scenario happen.
So we've sort of established that this character creation guide can be used for pretty much any era with, within limits. Um, is there and you've talked about these central casting books and how they had sort of, I guess, um like various genres.
That's right. Yeah, they had horror, sci-fi, and so they were designed for those settings. And so this book was in many ways attempting to do that, but for Call of Cthulhu.
Have you considered that of expanding the guide with like other supplements or other tables to say, hey, if you wanted to play specifically in this time period, or these types of like BRP scenarios maybe, or maybe completely other like D&D, for instance, is that something that you've thought about doing, or do you feel like you've done your job and you're ready to try new things?
Ooh, that's a big question. So short answer, yes, absolutely thought about it. In fact, the second major book I've published, the Guide to Carcosa, uh, at certain points in the design process was intended as a direct expansion on the character creation guide, where it would essentially either replace tables or supplement them, and provide new directions to go. And then you can even see that a bit in the character creation guide, where you have handouts, you have player handouts in the character creation guide, and depending on what you find, a copy of the King in Yellow, perhaps, right, it can lead to more specific events. And so I thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun if we added Carcosa dimensions or Yoggoth dimensions? So yes, I thought about it. I suspect that I will not go back and do that for a number of reasons. Primarily, though, I like products to have a period after them. I think one of the big challenges as community content creators is that we don't know when to stop, and we want to keep fiddling and we want to keep play testing, because we know that's going to make it better. And it's true, but there are diminishing returns. And so now that this book is in print, has been successful, I feel good about it. There is much more that one could do with it, but if I went down that path, I think it would hamper the rest of my creative process. And so for that reason, it's kind of important for me to say, no, I think this is good. This stands on its own. And glad that people are having fun with it.
Look, I don't think that it needs anything else for my purposes. I mean, it's been amazing, and I'm definitely going to continue to use this in my games. I might actually consider making some of my own tables.
Yeah.
So, how difficult was it for you to create these tables? Because to me, I think a lot of people think like, "Oh yeah, dude, it's easy. You make a list of numbers, make sure it matches up to a set of dice, and then just slap down a bunch of stuff." But it feels to me like there is a an art form, part art, part science kind of thing when it comes to doing this. How did you what was the struggle like, or the experience like, I should say, in creating something like that?
Well, some of it was straightforward. Some of it was as you describe it. So when you're coming up with meaningful locations, for example, yeah, it's a table of places. Um, that's the first go around. After that, you then continue to revisit it and see if you can come up with some more interesting things, kind of add your own creative input to it. But other tables are entirely um, not standalone, but sort of require their own creative energy. So um, there would be tables I would create, uh, maybe cursed artifacts, let's say, and I didn't know what was going to go in the table. I just knew, hey, this would be cool, right? Or there's a table on what happens in the boiler room. Why the boiler room? I don't know. It's just there's lots of places that have boiler rooms, right? It's sort of an iconic setting, and you can imagine different weird things happening there. So I would just have fun, kind of creating this table and putting in the results, and not necessarily know how it was going to connect to the rest of the book. And so the creative process for this was going over and over and over again a list of tables and adding to the tables and creating ever more connections between them. I mean, I did have kind of rules of thumb in mind, where I wanted to make sure every table could be accessed by X number of other tables, so that there was a reasonable chance that you would stumble upon it. But always, it was a balance between making sure that you provide just enough information to provide inspiration, but not so much information that you are turning this from a data point into a piece of your character's story. Because the story, again, is what you come up with by connecting those different things. and it's especially rewarding when you're doing it with a group of players because you have so many more data points to play off of, right? And someone has a weird school event, and you're like, maybe we went to school together, and I'm this person that's in mentioned in the event. So that was the process, and late in the production process, of course, was the most biggest pain, which was making sure that all the numbers were accurate, making sure that all the cross references to tables, because it's very important, of course, if you're going to have all of these tables, and sometimes you go like 3 tables deep, right? You're like, go from table A to table X to table 14 to whatever. And that's part of the fun, is to feel like you're going down a rabbit hole. But those tables better cite each other correctly. Otherwise, you've got a heck of a mess.
I mean, I really enjoyed the character creation. Like I started making a character on my own just because I was like, okay, I'm gonna before I put my players through this, I want to see what the process is like to kind of get an
Definitely.
idea of where we're going with this. And so I was sitting outside on a sunny day where I'm doing this thing. My wife is on the iPad and she's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I got this book. I'm making a character for, Call of Cthulhu." She's like, "Oh, can I try?" You have to understand, like my wife is not into role-playing games whatsoever. And so when she's like, "Oh, well, I'd like to make a character." So her and I went through making a character together, and I actually found it like super helpful to kind of figure out. Like there was a few points where I was like, I'm not sure what we're supposed to be doing here, and then it was, a perfect learning opportunity. And she had a lot of fun doing it. So, I mean, I was like, "Are you sure you don't want to play with us? You got a cool character already." The one thing I wish that I would have done is, so even though we made characters together in my group, um, they were sort of doing it individually. Like
Mm-hmm.
they were sharing the book between them and going through a PDF. So there was talk, and I was answering questions as we were going through. But I think in retrospect, the way you're describing it of doing it together would have made the characters fit more together, because I think I had one regret of kind of how the process played out, it would have been that the characters, while all very interesting individually, I felt like we're lacking a little bit of cohesion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which they're fine. Like my players are great, so they're not like, well, actually, that's not what my character would do. But nonetheless, it's been fantastic. So talking
Yeah.
about Carcosa, the solo book. Now, this to me, now correct me if I'm wrong, this is similar in some ways to the Alone Against the series that Chaosium has put out. Is that right?
Yes, I think that is correct in terms of it is a solo experience that you can enjoy just the book and yourself, or that you can have a keeper sort of reading from the book while you make the decisions and roll the dice.
Basically, what you were saying before is like the idea for this spawned out of trying to make a second volume of character creation tables, or was it like you had the idea from the character creation and then you decided to like go down this path?
This book was so many different things in the creative process, and on my YouTube channel, I actually have like design video blogs, I guess that was what they would be called, of kind of like showing people, here's the notebook where I've scrawled my notes about this thing and the things that I want in it, to like the evolution of, okay, we now have to let go these ideas because they no longer fit with the book, to, hey, we got to make decisions on this book can't be everything. So in the development process, the guide to Carcosa was everything from an expansion or alternative to the character creation book to a much more structured story where you played one of 3 characters with their established backgrounds, and you sort of experienced their story through the book, to what it became now, which was this, I think, curious hybrid between a book that has you create a character, um, that is for this solo campaign. And it is a campaign because the idea is that you're making a character, terrible things will probably happen to them. And then you, the leader, will create a new character and go through it again. And there are events in the game that are relying on you having made several run throughs of the book and a story that develops as you play through it over and over again. But it's part of the design challenge for me was I knew that I wanted this book to have a really strong Silent Hill influence, right? The video game series, if you're familiar. So Silent Hill 2, one of the greatest games ever, right? Very touching story about someone experiencing personal anguish, coming to this town, meeting others who have their own personal nightmares, and seeing that they're all existing in this hell of their own creation. And I think that's such a poignant and powerful motif that I wanted that. I wanted my Carcosa to be some version of that. But the challenge is how do you kind of create these personalized events for characters based on their backgrounds when you as the writer just you do not know what they're going to make. And so the compromise that the book reached is you can sort of take any character through it. You can use the character creation rules in the guide to Carcosa. You can use the investigator, the character creation guide. You can do all of that. But each character is going to have what I call a mask in the book. And the mask is a representation of that character's unresolved burden, if you will. So there may be the mask of the lost, someone who has lost someone close to them and can't get over that loss. There are masks of the fugitive, of someone who is running away from something bad that they did, right? That sort of pursues them. And they're very kind of vague and open-ended, like the results in the character creation guide themselves, because you're supposed to be able to tailor those to your own. And frankly, for most investigators, if they have a fleshed out story, any of the masks, you can probably potentially find some connection, right, for why they're hung up. And then as you go through this Carcosa guide, which has several different maps of different versions of Carcosa and lots of different locations, the locations will change based on the mask you're wearing. So you may visit a location several times, but because of you're wearing the mask of the lost, because there's some unresolved missing person in your life, this location is different, and maybe you meet a mirage of that person. And so all the events have to be written in a way that is both compelling, but also constructively ambiguous enough to allow you to once again connect the data points in your mind, right? So the guide has lots of sections where you meet the person that you lost, if that's the mask you're wearing, but we can't say who that is, right? Because that's always going to be dependent on the character. It could be their child, it could be a spouse, it could be a friend, and so the events have to be flexible enough to allow your imagination to interpret them within that specific location.
That's fascinating. How much replayability does this have? So say I do one run through the book, um, and I create, I guess when you're saying masks, obviously it's like an archetype, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
character, right? So you're creating, I'm imagining that every time you do this, you're going to be creating a different character. So even though you have this one mask of this one archetype, um,
You've got your own skills, you've got your own occupation. Yeah.
but if I create a new character who's also an archetype of that character, of that mask, um, the story might play out a little bit differently because the character is going to be different, right?
Exactly. It may play out differently because the character is different. So they will have different skills that allow them to overcome or approach challenges differently in the book. So at a minimum, I would say I would encourage folks to kind of play through it 4 times so that you experience each of the masks. We've got Mask of the Lost, Mask of the Addict, Mask of the Masochist, and Mask of the of Guilt. And so there's specific events with each of those. But even once you've done that, it's not as though the locations that you visit, and this book is divided by locations, is going to be the same in every run through. And so we actually have, I don't know if you'll be able to show this or not, but there are different maps of Carcosa, almost like a board game, where you move from one location to the next, and you could choose to visit different locations. And so even though you've done a run through with your Mask of the Lost or what have you, if you're visiting a different set of locations, you're going to have a different set of experiences. And maybe those experiences will also be different by virtue of which locations you visited before and which after. Because, of course, there are, once again, sort of these handouts that you get that may be useful at different parts of the story, or in this particular run through, may not have a significance. But what encourages the various playthroughs is that as you're going across these maps, and there are 3 different maps of Carcosa, kind of depicting it as your classic crumbling city, but also as a stock metropolis, sort of like a cult setting, and then also what I call Disturbia, which is sort of a suburban neighborhood, Carcosa. As you are rolling, going from location to location, you are filling in those boxes as to what is at that location. And so you have variability in that you could play on a different map with a different character, but you can also go different directions on this map and visit locations that you haven't seen before. Or if you are trying to sort of for a more completionist playthrough, you can use the knowledge that you have gained as the reader, as the player, to know, like, okay, I don't want to go to this location because I know it's a really hard area, and every time I've gone, I've died there, so I'm going to go around it. But that allows you to adjust your playthrough based on your outside of the game knowledge, which then factors into the broader story that the book weaves.
Interesting. That is really cool. This must have taken you a long time to create and put together.
So this book took me a year and a half to produce. A lot of that time was faffing about and figuring out what this thing is, because I was really figuring it out as I went. What is possible? What can I do to get the most of the original ideas that gave this project impetus into it, and have a working product. So yeah, the character creation guide took about a year. Carcosa took a year and a half, and yeah, it was. I mean, I'll say it was a very emotional journey as well, because the book followed the death of my brother-in-law, who had been a significant inspiration. So as I was working on it, I was also processing a lot of those feelings. And yeah, if you go through and you read the afterword, then you can get a bit more background on that. But it was really a passion project, near and dear to my heart.
My condolences. Um, so tell me about the Council of Shoggoths. From what I understand, you were a leader of a cult. Is that correct?
Well, it amuses me that you would say cult, because one of the big ideas, I think, in many of the things I've written is the idea that Call of Cthulhu investigators are just the preludes to becoming cultists, right? That an investigator who lives long enough inevitably becomes a cultist and becomes the very thing that other investigators are hunting. No, the Council of Shoggoths was a fairly random set of folks who met each other on Facebook. Marek Golonka in Poland, a creator of the Grozny series on the Miskatonic Repository, prolific writer, started coming up with the idea of, like, maybe we should do a convention that's focusing on just things that people are writing for the Miskatonic Repository. And as I was in the midst of writing my own scenarios, I thought this is a great way of building the community, but also marketing ourselves, right? Getting our names out there. We sort of had, I think it was like 3 rules as part of the Council of Shoggoths and taking on creating this convention, which was, need to have fun. We need to build the community, and we need to market ourselves. And everything we do should relate to one or hopefully more of those. And so the convention was intended to help people achieve that, both to get players who otherwise would not discover the repository, and give authors a chance to introduce their scenarios to them. So that was, I think, 6 years ago, and we ran. I was the chair of the convention for 5 of those years, and this is the first year that I'm not participating. I hung up my hat, and T.A. Newman of the Miskatonic Playhouse has taken over the chairship this year, and I am just thrilled to see where it's going to go from here.
So this is something that anybody from the public can go and play these games and get exposed to what you guys are putting out. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So this convention came right before COVID. And so it was everything was going online, and this convention was always going to have to be online because one of the things that's great about the community is it's worldwide, right? You have Call of Cthulhu players in Australia, Japan, all over Europe, all over the United States. So you've got all of these different time zones. So you really have to try and work with where people are coming from and where they're able to join. And yeah, it is a convention where if you have something that you have published on the repository, or even that you are planning to publish, right, you may still be in the playtesting phase. So long as it meets that criteria and it uses the Call of Cthulhu 7th edition rules, you can run it, right? And yeah, we've got folks who run playtests, we have folks who run workshops, we have panels, and yeah, it's been a great journey, and I think I like to think that it has been one of the things that has really helped the Miskatonic Repository community grow. That was one of our founding principles, and we have continued that, and that's sort of what I continue doing now.
Interesting. Have you published stuff on the Dungeon Masters Guild, or is it specifically just you've only worked on like Miskatonic Repository material?
Yeah, so recently, just this year, I am branching out to another game system that I'm very fond of that doesn't have a community content program, alas. So when we publish, it's sort of as publishers as opposed to community content creators, although that's still how I think of myself. And that is the Fabula Ultima TTJ RPG, a game system that is intended to reproduce the feel of those early Final Fantasy turn-based combat SNES RPGs. And I released a book called the Isekai Fantasy Atlas, which is intended to kind of help you if you want to use the setting and have that I have been reincarnated as a vending machine or as a sword or as an aristocrat or what have you, right, in another dimension, or I've gone through the portal. This book is intended to help you do that through a few custom rules, settings, and villains.
Interesting. Um, I just wanted to go back really quick. Uh, so let's say somebody's interested in joining the Miskatonic repository, getting something published. How do they go about doing that, or what would be your recommendations for someone who would like to do that?
There are fortunately a lot of inroads that you can follow. At its most basic, you can write a scenario or some kind of supplement, and you can just go on Drive Through RPG and via your account post it. I mean, the entry is very low. You can just go ahead. Um, but I think what most of us want to feel is the sense that we're not just posting a Word document online. We want to feel as though we have achieved something, we have created a scenario that is in some way something that we are proud of, that's beautiful, that's complete. And so if you want to go above and beyond to achieve that, among the best ways to get more involved are to go on the Facebook Miskatonic Creator Circle, which is a community of Cthulhu content creators. There is the Miskatonic Repository Convention Discord, where yes, that is where the convention takes place, but Historically, also lots of people have been there, exchanged ideas, exchanged contact information, helped one another out, scheduled playtests, things like that. And then we have the Miskatonic Playhouse, which is a group that produces videos and podcasts of playthroughs of Miskatonic Repository titles, focuses specifically on that, and has very much the same mission of encouraging creativity and helping people along. So getting involved in those communities is a great way to see how other people are going about it and become involved. And you might start by editing someone else's scenario, or you might, start by writing your own thing or play testing it into creation. So very low bar to entry, and fortunately, a lot of great resources. And I'll say, even if you don't want to be social, right? If you don't want to engage with the community that much, there are so many great resources that we have online, from your own channel to my channel that talks about different aspects of creating community content, to Leslie Horn, XP Lovecraft, right? So many great folks that you can go to for advice. And what's great is, for so many of us, if you want to know more and if you just want to reach out, you can, right? And we'll probably respond, because that's kind of why we're here. That's part of what brings us joy.
My experience with the community thus far has been very welcoming. Um, I haven't dug deeply into the Miskatonic repository, but it's been when I started this podcast, that was kind of like one step of mine into, like, trying to seize on, my creativity, and put something out there for the community. But it's long been like a dream of mine to like
Mm-hmm.
write something and have it published. And I feel like we're living in a golden age right now when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to the ability to do a lot of like self-publishing and stuff like that. Um, and I guess the only thing that's really stopping me at this point is like, myself, and not taking the time to sit down and, really, dedicate the time to make it happen. Um,
Well, careful when you're talking to someone like me, you'll start hearing me say things like, "Well, what's your timeline? What are the deadlines?" Because we are very affirmative in kind of helping people to get that product out. There's a lot of advice that we give, from you know produce something that you're only 80% satisfied with, right, and get it out there. Appreciate that the first thing you publish is probably going to be the worst thing you publish, and you got to get over that. You got to be terrible before you can be good. But with the resources that the community provides, I think one of the stumbling blocks that I had, and that I think others have, is eventually you realize a scenario is more than just the words on the page. It's the art, it's the layout, it's the quality of the handouts. There's so much that can go into it, if you want. And many of these things are fields in themselves, like creative fields in themselves. Art, creating art, right? That is obviously like a whole separate thing from writing. And you can't do it all. Although many community content creators get awfully close to doing it all. But through the community, you can find resources to export some of those tasks that allow you to focus on the aspects that you find fun. Right? For me, it's the writing and the editing. But I don't do art. I can't draw very well at all. I can't do layout. I don't understand that software. I'm not good with it. So individuals like Alex Guilot, for example, who does amazing scenarios in his own right, but also has done a lot of layout services, including for both the Carcosa guide and the character creation guide, is my go-to. Um, and that can add so much to a scenario and make you feel like it is a product of beauty, right? That you take pride in, as opposed to just kind of a text document.
right. No, I mean, your book is amazing in terms of the layout is great, the art it's great, and um it's evocative for, like, I feel like it fits that time period, and it fits that Cthulhu 1920s vibe, which I think is really important. Um, because this podcast started with a focus on game masters, what kind of advice would you give to a novice or a veteran game master? It could be one piece of advice for both, or one piece of advice for, each kind of, category. What would you offer keepers or game masters, referees, whatever you want to call them?
I think one of the challenges that folks new to the hobby or new to game mastering have these days is the voluminous amounts of good advice. There's no shortage of it. Um, and I am reminded of when I got into creative writing, and I would buy all of these books about creative writing, and they were really informative. They were well written. I enjoyed reading them, and I wasn't doing any writing. And so I think one can easily fall into the same hole nowadays because of all the good information that is out there. You can start feeling as though if you are not, let's say, doing voices, have great handouts, have music playing in the background, that you are, in a sense, not giving the full experience. And I think that is definitively false. And so I think the advice I would have for folks who are getting into it, however much they may enjoy watching all of these videos on how to do it, give yourself a deadline of running a game, and don't feel like you need to run a game for 6 people. Right? For me, the sweet spot is 3 players, 1 GM. That gives everyone lots of spotlight. And usually the group stays together as opposed to like forming teams of 2 and 2 or 3 and 2
Mm.
or 3 and 3, or three twos. Um, so that can also kind of help manage expectations and make it a bit more, well, manageable, because it can be more difficult to run bigger tables.
For sure. Ah, that's great advice. I really like that actually. The I guess it's like anything, too much of a good thing isn't necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, you're building yourself up, right? And I think we talked earlier about getting started on the Miskatonic Repository, and I'm so grateful that I started when I did all these years ago, because when I went on it, there were some things that were just text files on there, and that gave me the confidence to go, well, I can do that, right? I can do at least that. And then I would see some scenarios with some art, but it was like public, open source art. I was like, I can find that, right? I can copy that. And that helped me kind of develop over time and become more ambitious. I think now, when people get on the repository and they see all of these books and scenarios with gorgeous layout and art, and the covers are amazing, it I imagine it can be quite intimidating to think, ooh, I can't do this, because of course you can't do all aspects of this, um, because it requires a team. But that's what the community provides, right? It provides you the team to do that, and very few people are doing it all themselves.
No, well, you definitely set the bar high, that's for sure. And I tend to agree with you in the sense that, I mean, you do want to have a pretty product. You do want to have something that's, well laid out and easy to use. But I also agree you got to start somewhere, right? And I think this is probably the perfect opportunity for a lot of people. So, kind of finishing it out, what can we expect for the future of Heinrich? I guess Heinrich Moore Presents. That would be your brand.
That is my YouTube channel. So I would love to create more content for it, but it's one of those things that I'm terrible at, right? It was, let me teach myself video editing, right? With that ambition of like I can do it all, and I can't. But that is one place where you will be able to find more of me. In terms of the books I'm working on, there are 2 projects. So I mentioned earlier that I had started writing products for the Fabula Ultima TTJ RPG, and so the follow-on to the Isekai Fantasy Atlas is going to be the Urban Fantasy Atlas, which allows me to also dig a bit more into those horror roots. That is really where I come from as a writer. So this is going to be inspired by anime like Tokyo Ghoul, Jujutsu Kaisen, and other Hellsing, Vampire Hunter D, all of that that genre. Um, so that's what I'm working on personally. The other project, which is taking up most of my time, is called The Year of the Goat. The Year of the Goat is an anthology of 12 scenarios, all featuring the great old one, Shub-Niggurath, one of Lovecraft's eldritch entities, often associated with like fertility and mutation, uh, and in my mind, sort of underrepresented in the current Cthulhu universe. So I wanted to really get more scenarios featuring that entity out there. So we opened pitches for the book, and we had many authors send in pitches. We chose a number of those. Then we worked with the authors to create outlines. Then we did first drafts, second drafts, third drafts. We're now on fourth drafts for layout. And we're about 50% of the way there in terms of scenarios prepped for layout. We are hoping to be on course with releasing the book early in January. And we're going to have a series of videos that are going to be introducing the different authors and the different scenarios that they have written. And so we're really hopeful that this is going to be a great platform for existing authors, but we also have a number of first-time authors who are going to be featured. And we're just really excited to get to be part of that experience of them putting out their first scenario.
That is super rad. I'm that's one of my favorite um entities
Mm,
in the mythos. There, I mean, I love deep ones and everything like that, but um like these just big, walking trees and stuff like
yeah.
that. I mean, it's pretty creepy. So that's exciting. I'm definitely gonna try and get my hands on that. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Heinrich, for taking the time out of your day to come and talk to me and share your, thoughts and, talk about your character creation guide. And like I told you off air, I have Carcosa is in my drive-through basket right now. I'm just getting ready to like pull the trigger on that. And then I'm gonna get it printed out and bound and like start diving into that. And I'm super excited for that because it feels like it's so much more than the Alone Against the Dark series from Chaosium, which just makes me even more excited to check it out because I really enjoyed the Alone Against series that they did. So again, thanks for being on the show and helping me plunge the dungeon. We have once again flushed evil down the drain, and I just wanted to throw it out. If you can comment, like Facebook, follow me on all the socials. I'm on Blue Sky and X, and I also have a TikTok. And join the union. It would be much appreciated. In addition, I will have links in the show notes to Heinrich's drive-through RPG page as well as his YouTube channel. Please go there, show him the love, and throw him some of your monies. Give him your monies. I'm sure he'll appreciate it. So until next time, plungers up.